It's interesting that the Vatican says that, Peter was the first pope when really it was John. But John was never considered a pope. But it's sort of fitting not to put Peter down or the apostles, but it's been made out to everyone that all the dead martyrs is somehow more courageous. It's not, though. Because the living martyrs, they have to continue to go on and still be persecuted like John and witness. John was the ultimate example. John was the succession to the church, and he never went to Rome. So, that Vatican will still say whatever, they just lie all the time. But, just misguided. I guess I could be kinder, right? They're just misguided, okay? All of the apostles betrayed Jesus. All of them did. Except John. And Mary Magdalene. But again, Mary Magdalene wasn't picked to go out. Like, she was an apostle, but not one that was picked as part of the 12. Because, again, it's because really, if you look at it, nobody back then would have taken her seriously, much like today, because we still have men that are the same as they were back then. Jesus knew that, many of the men just wouldn't ever mature. Look at all the pastors that, still carry on that women shouldn't teach. Anyway, doesn't matter. My point is that the people that were loyal and the two witnesses to Jesus his entire life was that were not related to him, even though the Catholic Church runs around about Mother Mary, like yeah, she was the carrier of Jesus. She wasn't persecuted, she wasn't nailed to a cross, but they create a rosary, they create idol, but it's a pagan religion. But John is really the succession. And that would make sense. He was loyal to Jesus. I'm not trying to say that Jesus didn't forgive the others, but if people remember, Jesus told Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he said, no, I won't do that, I won't do that. He did that. Thaddeus, Bartholomew, Simon, Peter, missing a couple of, Judas Iscariot committed suicide. But both Judas and they all of them except John and Mary Magdalene betrayed him. Especially Peter. So it's kind of fitting, like, did Jesus plan it that way? No, because God knows all things way in advance. So did he know, I'm going to say this to Peter, and there's going to be this heretic pagan church that's going to create a whole religion around him, yet he betrayed Jesus? Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, Jesus forgave him, okay, because he went on to be one of the apostles. But again, these were all the people that didn't believe until they saw Jesus resurrected. So it meant everything. That's the reason John was the most loved. Jesus knew that he would stay at that cross, not knowing what was going to happen to him. At that point, he didn't know that Jesus was going to resurrect in 3 days, even though Jesus said, you will tear the church, the temple down, and I rebuild it in 3 days. That's how you know the church was talking about the body. Because that's why he came back in 3 days. He rebuilt the temple. So he told Peter, yeah, on this rock I'll, start my church. And then he knew that pagan religion would run with that, when really all the while Jesus is, nope, the real church is the real succession in the real church will be with John. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, nobody in the church will look at it, because they all went to seminary school, destroyed the faith. It just did. It was the worst thing, because by going to seminary school, you never consider a different, you just go with whatever Rome says. Again, because every seminary school took from the model of the Catholic Church. So I think that's interesting. I was thinking about that today because because it says in the Bible, if you deny me, then I will deny you to my Father. Obviously, that was before the Holy Spirit came, but the true hero that is I never hear talked about is John, because again, and I wouldn't have realized that if it hadn't been for God saving Donald Trump all the time. It's like, and yet this world, it's still doing the same thing. No, it's the dead martyr that's so important. The dead one is so important. No, it's not. It's the living one. That's the most courageous one. That's the one that doesn't even need to run around and, carry on about Bible verses, but just shows in his life that he, is why, his example is why God saves him. I'm telling you, that's why the Holy Spirit's important, because do you think I just come up with it on my own? Believe me, I'm not stupid, but no, the Spirit leads you to ask these questions. But again, the churches have been a barrier to people knowing knowing the power of that Holy Spirit. That it will tell you the truth. And then when you sit back and you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, Peter betrayed Jesus. So no wonder that pagan church worships Mary so much. I mean, and they pick the one that denied Jesus. Oh, he was the first pope. It's almost like you wonder if Jesus did that on purpose. Like he knew there'll be some people that'll have the Holy Spirit in them, and I will lead them to how John was really, he was the church. And it wasn't a building, it was in homes. It was the community, the fellowship was in people's homes. And he was never martyred to death. And you may think, oh, well, then he got off easy. No, he really didn't. Because by, you get martyred to death, then your witness is done. And you may think, but that means they're more courageous. No, John is. It didn't mean his entire life, that the longer your life is, the longer you're going to have to suffer then. John's the succession of the church. John's the one that God most wanted you to pay attention to, not because he didn't love the others, but that there was a specific reason that John was set aside. And Mary and John were the only people that were not related to him that stayed with him the whole time. John stayed with him during the trial. None of the apostles stayed. They all fled, even from that, and that was before the crucifixion. So see, it was almost, that's the reason Jesus told them that you're going to go on. So the example I'm trying to set here is that Jesus doesn't want dead martyrs, but it was going to happen because they all betrayed him. Did he forgive them? Yes, but there were consequences for that. They would have to go on and face what Jesus did because of what they did. Consequences. John, on the other hand, didn't worry about if he was going to get arrested by staying there. He loved Jesus enough and was courageous enough to stay there, not knowing what would happen to him, not knowing that Jesus would be back in 3 days. And so Jesus showed the consequence for that kind of faith. That's where my church is.